Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, ask a special guest to nominate a story for me to commentate through, dropping in facts and observations and hopefully a bit of fun. And I also have to guess what their favourite thing about each episode of the story is.
Hi there, this is Annie Wallace here. I play Sally Sinclair on Channel 4's Hollyoaks. So, when Toby asked me which story would I like to talk about, I had a big think, and I have chosen Planet of the Spiders.
Well, hello everybody, and excuse me while I just play in the last 7 minutes of the previous episode of this podcast, interspersed with a few bits you haven't heard before. No, but this will be interesting. Interesting alert. But by the way, non-regular listeners, if I say interesting, it means I'm about to say something not very interesting. Or I'm being so uninteresting, I've used the word interesting, which I think is the podcasting equivalent of the word nice. It's a sort of fairly unambitious and actually rather flabby and horrible word to use that actually works against what I'm trying to say, and it's usually me, you know, plucking that word from my subconscious whilst trying to throw my brain forward for something interesting to say. Doesn't always work, as this probably attests. However, I have brought with me, because the early episodes of this podcast went out before I'd recorded my thoughts on the whole story, I've got some feedback from the patrons. You have patrons, Toby? I do. They stop these podcasts from having adverts in them. Men, are you skinny? No. So, and also they get their releases several months before mere mortals who go to iTunes and Spotify and all of those places. So first of all, I need to say that, yes, if you listen to episode 2 and want to say to me, a mini-moke is the vehicle used in the novel of the Sea Devils and also in the TV series The Prisoner, I know, thank you. Andrew Llewellyn and John Deere were among those pointing such things out. Obviously, in the Sea Devils, in the TV version, they were citrons, weren't they? But mini-moke, which I think I'd mused maybe was the word for the gyrocopter, but no, a mini-moke is a small land vehicle. But it was Pertwee, it was transport. I don't even drive. I'm accepting. I'm making no excuses. Other people who have spoken to me on various subjects to do with this episode. James Gould, because I said I thought the Whomobile was called the Wombile. James Gould says, I always thought it was the WHO mobile, but I think James's tongue might be firmly in his cheek there. Frank Shales, his school friend Jeremy, used to call it the Wombile too, so I'm not alone. When I originally read that, I thought Frank was saying, I too am a Wombile person. No, it's his friend. It's his friend Jeremy. I mean, I don't even, is Jeremy a fan? If so, he's got an excuse. I'm not sure what mine is. And also what did David Gillespie and I had a bit of back and forth. Just about whether we were talking about, because we're referring to episode 2 as The Chase, because it's The Chase, but it's not The Chase, the Doctor Who story, nor is it the Chase, the TV quiz show, or as David pointed out, there's a BBC drama called The Chase. Oh, is that the one with Rhys Dinsdale? And it was a sort of family thing, wasn't it? I think it was filmed up here. Pookie Cannell was in it as well, I think. God, was that 2006? Getting old. And also not The Chase, the episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, which has Stotts from the Caves of Androzani in it, so that gets even more confusing. Anyway, so that's the quality of chitter-chatter, just about one episode of Planet of the Spiders on my Patreon page, and it's the patrons who allow these things to be not punctuated by low-quality adverts, so that the off-the-cuff dynamic commentary you hear now is unsullied by commercialism. Who's to say it might not be improved by Anyway, let's not get into that. So we have episode 6 of Planet of the Spiders coming right up. BritBox's menu has just lost it for me. What's Troppo? I don't know what it jumped. Right, here we go. So I am going to not watch Troppo, whatever that is. I've got Doctor Who back. Here's a note, by the way, BritBox. Even bad DVDs have menus so that you know what's on the DVD. Do you know what I mean? You don't seem to have... You don't have everything listed on your title, but this isn't an advert for BritBox. This is an advert for what BritBox should be doing to cover the basics. It's like having a train service and you don't run any... Oh, hang on. We've got one of those. The world's going to hell in a handcart. I've become one of those people. I might have to write an angry letter to Points of View at this rate. I'm so furious. I might have to move to Milton Keynes just to write my letters. It's Toby from the future here. I was right about Rhys Dinsdale being in the 2006 series The Chase, but not Pookie Canal. She must have been in something else. Well, she's been in loads of other things, but Gaynor Faye, Nicholas Stevenson, lots of other people in the 2006 series The Chase, which I don't think anyone's going to rush off and watch, but as I had a little bit of surgery to do to this episode before putting it out, I thought I'd jump in and make that correction, but mostly it's because I want to make space for a listener correspondence that I missed out, and as I was doing those before episode 6, it seems only fair that I give Joe Llewellyn his shout, because Joe, who's a great correspondent over on Patreonville, and it's always nice to get some input from across the pond, because Joe is an American gentleman. Joe says, "This is a new one for me. I really don't know too much about it, except there's a chase, but not the chase with Rhys Dinsdale and not Pookie Canal." He didn't put that. That's in brackets with Ed after it. The chase, and Pertwee regenerates at the end, and Roger Delgado's widow voiced the spider. That's quite correct. I'm liking it so far. I like Mike Yates's hair, and I love his car from last episode. It's a good car, isn't it? Not to mention the driving gloves. I don't mind Mike growing out his hair since he is out of the military. Because of Joe will explain. Because of scheduling this summer, I went 2 months without putting on the uniform, and I had quite the beard and head of hair until I had to shave. I grew up on 70s TV with CSO effects in shows like Land of the Lost and Shazam /ISIS Hour, so I have no problem with CSO. Thanks for Joe. Yes, Joe has been a patron since day dot, and sometimes we do stories that he's not had before. So I think he'd had an idea to watch stories in a particular order. He was saving some, and I've ruined that by doing them for Happy Times and Places, and so he has to do them then. But he's a game participant in the process and always has an interesting perspective. So I thought, and it's always a joy to hear from him, so I thought I'd mention Joe. Anyway, a correction and an addition, and now we'll go back to then when I was about to watch Planet of the Spiders episode 6. Right, we are going to watch episode 6 of Planet of the Spiders because this is an exercise in watching something and seeing the positives in it. And this episode, which I watched first of Planet of the Spiders, because I was collecting all the orphan episodes and then some of the black and white ones, but I had space for one episode after some of the black and white ones that I'd claimed that I needed. So because you got 7 episodes on a tape, whatever it was, that had space for one episode left right at the end, so I asked for Planet of the Spiders episode 6. So it was my first Pertwee bootleg, and my goodness, it was a disappointment. But I've now come to it with the first 5 episodes leading up, and also I've grown up a bit, and this exercise has always made me enjoy something a bit more than I have on previous occasions. So let's hope I'm not going to turn the air blue, but instead I will be green with envy for those who watched this when it went out first time, which I could have done and might well have done, but I would have been 6 months and a week old, so probably wouldn't really have registered. I'm going to watch from the beginning. Don't know about you, and I'm going to press watch from the beginning in 3, 2, 1. Oh, it started now. Yeah, sorry about that. That opening where I think I was not perhaps as cogent as I sometimes am. It's quite late, but I felt I was in the mood to watch and finish off Planet of the Spiders, to try and get back onto schedule, because some of these are going out close to live for the patrons. Who did I remind you are 6 months ahead. So now, of course, I had got in the back of my head, even though I know that this starts here, it starts with the shot of Campo Rinpoche, was that I had thought, because it would originally have been part of it would have been part of episode 6 originally, is I kind of, so I miscalculated Tommy's line when she says, you're just like everybody else, and he says, I sincerely hope not, would have been in this episode, but of course it's not, even though it should have been originally, had the story not had the domino effect of episode 3 underrunning, mean that it's all been rather messed about with. So I've not been able to choose that line of Tommy's, which is, I think, probably my favourite thing about the story. I think it's lovely. I have already chosen Tommy, though. I was hoping to choose the great one for this episode, but I can't, because Annie chose that for an episode you didn't see the great one in, so that's not my fault, it's Annie's fault, but I can't be rude about my guest. So I'm just checking that I'm filming this, which I am, for if this ever goes out on YouTube. So this is Pertwee's last episode, and I love the fact that it ties back in with the time monster, and he talks about, the wise old hermit, and of course he and Joe are in the cell that they are held in with King Dalios, who is played by George Cormack, because so this sequence was not in the last episode, but it's a nice bit for Terence Lodge, who is another actor who's given great service to the Pertwee era by being Aurum in Carnival of Monsters. In fact, 3 of these 4, because Andrew Staines, the one now talking, the bald man with the moustache, is also in Carnival of Monsters, and he's Googe in the Lunchbox in Terror of the Autons. But this land, Carl Forgione, is the only one that doesn't have a connection with the previous Pertwee era. And in fact, when I first got this, he was like, I don't know this guy, because he's not in any other Doctor Who's. And I'd not seen him in anything else, or at least I thought I had. He's not an actor who'd registered with me. But then, of course, he subsequently returned to Doctor Who to play Nimrod in Ghostlight. And it was like, oh, good, now that means all of these 4 baddies in Planet of the Spiders all have connections to other Doctor Who stories. Even if Carl Forgione is, unlike a lot of people in this story, somebody who has given service to the Pertwee era, and so his casting is, is not, so it's almost like he's a throw forward. But as I say, he's not an actor that I knew. But then after Ghostlight, he had some quite good appearances. He was a sort of semi-regular for some of the sort of comedy performers of the day when I was at university. So he was in the Day to Day and things like that, and the Alan Partridges. And then he sadly died relatively young. But he had a late blossoming of his career, particularly as a sort of comedy character actor. But the first time I saw him was in this. I love that image of Sarah with the spider on her back, and I love Sarah. I hope I'm not going to choose Sarah's stripy costume. That's my favourite thing about this episode. But I do love Sarah's stripy costume. I love. I think it's partially because it's on the Target book cover. That image of the spider on the back is a very striking one. It's interesting. Don't say interesting. Somebody on the Patreon, but it's on one of the other episodes, so apologies to whoever it was, talked about arachnophobia and being scared of spiders, and of course this is very much tapping into that, having had the creepiness of the maggots, and I always think Stephen Moffat is very good at cracking the wall, gas mask, statues, things from every day that can be creepy, and I think he sort of takes his cue from the Pertwee era, but those things that they choose are more from the natural world, and they play into our primal fears of certain creatures. And you know, spiders are, of course, something that people are very scared of, and so it's you know, it's a very economical way of providing a fright, because you're tapping into something that a lot of your audience are already scared of, or if my correspondence or anything to go by, things that people weren't scared of until they watched Planet of the Spiders. So Barry Letts has a lot to be responsible for. Obviously, we talk of Barry Letts with this story, but the writer credited is Robert Sloman, but we know now that Sloman and Letts sort of wrote together. Oh, she's lovely, isn't she? Such a good actress. She does all this sort of sci-fi stuff well. Yeah, so I have to say, I've never... I mean, I'm not a great fan of a creepy crawly, and sometimes in the night you can imagine a spider crawling on you. That's pretty grim. And I remember is it the film The Blue Lagoon, and the Brooke Shields one on a desert island? I think Leo McKern has a spider crawl out of his mouth when he's dead. That's stuck in my mind. But I'm not. My ex-flatmate Mark, mate of mine, was so scared of spiders, and he would kill them, which I don't like. So I would, in the end, I said, well, look, if you're scared, let me rescue them and take them out. But for me, it's Jaws did it for me. Sharks. I mean, I could swim in a landlocked lake. Even in a swimming pool. And there's still a part of me that worries that Jaws might come up and chomp on me. And as a youngster, absolute tears of terror swimming in the sea, worried that a shark would kill me. And that hasn't quite gone away, if I'm honest. So I would never mock anybody who is arachnophobic, either as a result of this or just compounded by this. I love the way that Campo Rinpoche sort of just gently digs at the Doctor here, and just throughout the story. Not all spiders sit on the back. He's got a lovely calmness about him, and he doesn't even bother to. He doesn't do what Kevin Lindsay does. He hasn't even bothered with an attempt at any sort of Tibetan hue to his accent. In fact, I mean, he's obviously Scottish. So Kanpo has obviously come from Tibet via... I can't identify exactly where that Scottish accent is from, but via Edinburgh, shall we say. It's not an Edinburgh accent, but... my guru, if you like. Oh, I think that's very sweet. And it's almost like they had a plan. I don't think they did when they were writing that bit in the Time Monster that they would sort of tie it back in, but it gives it a pleasing symmetry, and of course gives us a thematic through line to give the Doctor an ending that is more than just, oh, you've met a monster that's too hard to defeat. And Pertwee gets a lot of stick for being a bit snooty and a bit establishment, and he is vain, and Barry Letts has since said that Pertwee himself was not an unvain person, and the Doctor is sometimes, depending on the actor, can be an extension of the actor, and Pertwee was not a character actor in the same mould as Troughton, although he's extremely versatile. There's things like Wurzel Gummidge prove, but he's a bit of a sort of bridge between Troughton and Tom Baker. Tom Baker is a fantastic actor, but there's a lot of that Doctor that is Tom Baker. But they're all such wonderful, charismatic performers, aren't they? That's what you need from a Doctor, somebody who has and Pertwee's not as strong a character actor, oddly, that he can do all those voices, and as I say, Wurzel is a virtuoso thing, but I don't think you could consider him an actor in the same way that Troughton is a character actor and a sort of chameleon character actor, and that's not to be pejorative about one or the other. I think they're both great. Pertwee is such a singularly what's it? Tom Baker calls him a tall light bulb. He glitters, and that's a wonderful face. And I know that. Oh, and I think I only discovered relatively recently that this flashback, which actually really helps to give us a little bit of welly for the finale, was actually chucked in order to make the episode a bit longer. I haven't double checked. I don't have the scripts for Planet of the Spiders. I wanted to have a look and see, just read the episodes for myself, but I don't have them. Yeah, he's going to go and be very, very brave. He's got a wonderful face, hasn't he, Pertwee? And when he started, he'd not really done much drama acting in a television studio. You know, I mean, if at all, he'd done a couple of episodes of some other things, but I don't think they were drama. But he was not used to a television studio. He'd done lots of film and lots of radio, but he'd not acted that much on television at all before he was Doctor Who. And I know that Sue Upton, who was a production assistant on Silurians, and said that he was really nervous because he was worried that he didn't have what it took to be a television actor, because the comedy voices, the radio stuff, that is different. The personality stuff, cabaret review, they take great skill, but they are not the same. So if he was a bit sort of testy and vain, a lot of that stuff can be covering up for. I like the way Christopher Burgess slips there. It makes it look very real. Probably is real, but it just adds to it. But sometimes a lot of tetchiness can be covering up one's feeling of inadequacy. Hello, Arak and Tour, and the fringing around your fringes. It's very hard, isn't it, to sort of pull off an exterior of a planet in front of a blue screen. Barry Letts had a lot of faith in CSO, the famous blue screen of the Actian Galaxy, although he used a lot of yellow, didn't he? There was a bit of experimenting going on, and experimenting is what makes television improve. Of course it is. But it means that if your experiment makes a mess, everybody sees the results when they come to your lab. If your lab is transmitted at 5:25 on a Saturday tea time or whatever, everyone can see it. So whereas the television we watch now may well have benefited from Barry Letts going, should we try with yellow and see what happens? And it must be, mustn't it? Because there's so much blue. There's so much blue in the Doctor's costume. I mean, if he was in front of a blue screen, you'd just see his floating head. It's not a great episode for Lupton now, because I remember actually being really unimpressed with Lupton, because he's only got a couple of scenes in this episode, really, and it's a shame that the story doesn't really afford him. Because the Doctor goes and faces off against the Great One, he doesn't really have a proper face-off with Lupton. So we're about to see Lupton, get dispatched. I love that sort of cussed look the Doctor gives, as if to go, yeah, I'm going to go and face death, but you're not going to see me. You're not going to see me look scared. Yeah, it's his funny. His funny body language doesn't help him here, really, when he's having to sort of be raging in quite a small set, and especially when he gets killed and he sort of lowers himself to the ground. It is one of those, yeah, I don't want to hurt myself, but it's not a great end. And I think if you'd only seen this episode, as I did, you may have thought, I think would it be fair to go, Lupton's not up to much. But actually, he's great in the story, and just sort of fades out. There's Mike Yates is fine. No, I'm afraid this old body has had it. I think it's totally unconscious, but it's a nice it's a nice little callback to "This old body of mine is wearing a bit thin" that William Hartnell says. And of course, this is a sort of similar throw forward to the idea of the Watcher, where, you know, a future aspect of somebody is already manifest. I'm not quite sure how it works, that the two of you exist at the same time. Maybe if somebody had leant on Choji, they'd have fallen through him or something. But then how did he spin the thing round? Anyway, it works because it's part of the theme of regeneration and renewal and all of that. And I love the way that she's got a charming smile. And now we see what would have been my choice of my favourite thing for episode 6 of Planet of the Spiders, which is Maureen Morris as the Great One. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Maureen. I was delighted she agreed to do it because she's not on the DVD, and she's also a supporting artiste in the Macra Terror, but she's had a very good career. But I think her performance as the Great One is excellent. And I think this is all great. It's a slight shame about the fringing around Minnie Pertwee when he's got his back to us. But I think the Great One's a fantastic model. I love the crystalline construction above her, and that sort of the sort of membrane background and all of that. This is all lovely, and I mean, you're not afforded a great deal of options, I think, with lighting of stuff like this because he's in front of a screen, and I think you'd want to. I mean, you'd want to add to the atmosphere and the menace and the impending doom with, you know, lighting that suggested that you know, we're on the brink of disaster, and that maybe that the radiation is ravaging him, which means that Pert was having to do it with acting alone, and he does an absolutely fantastic job. You know, you get the impression that this is wearing him out a bit, which, seeing as he's just has to stand in the same place and talk to something that isn't there, is a huge achievement. So hats off to Pertwee, who I don't think, you know, I mean, credit to him for having doubts about himself. I always think if you have doubts about yourself, you're a much more interesting performer because, you know, you don't take it for granted. Nothing worse than watching an actor who just thinks they know it all. And I think he was wrong. He's got absolutely what it takes to do studio drama acting, which, as I say, I think we do forget that he'd not really done before he got cast in a leading role in a famous television program, playing a straight role as well when he was very much known for comedy. A brilliant piece of casting. Well done for thinking of Pertwee. And she does this brilliant. I love this whole speech about this me, the great all powerful me, and that is all about ego, isn't it? Which Buddhism, you know, is all about not having. It's about, you know, never mind about the you. Although, you know, like I mentioned alcoholism before, that it is a curious mixture of not being about you and yet kind of being about you, because you have to spend a lot of time thinking and within your own company in order to realize and behave as how unimportant you are. Yep, you can go and be in the Nescafe commercials, Gareth Hunt and Ray Farlis. You can go and be in Quatermass and stand for the Green Party and not reply to my letters, but that's okay. A little bit of Christopher Burgess had to do a little bit. Now, in the book, when the spiders fall off their backs, I think one of them, if not all, they start to weep. And that's something that Terence Dicks adds. Very good mountain explosion here. But Terence Dicks sometimes just adds little grace notes that in the book that just... Well, some he tidies up. You know, he very quickly just adds a few lines to go, you know, that plot bit that's hanging, I'm going to sort that out now. But I remember, I'm sure the men start to weep, which I think, you know, ties in very much with, you know, they're all damaged people who've come to be healed. It's actually rather sad for them that we don't see them getting the peace that they went for. But yes, Andrew Staines, who's the tall, bald one with the moustache, Kiva, was Barry Letts's nephew. Although, not too much of a difference in age. But he was the son of Barry Letts's sister, the actress Pauline Letts, which I didn't know actually until I interviewed Andrew, who was introduced to me by Terence Lodge, who's the little one who plays Moss, Mr. Moss. So Terry and Andrew kept in touch, and I went for lunch with them both. I'd already interviewed Terry. I then went with Andrew. I have Andrew. In fact, I have a drawing of Andrew's. I mentioned this in Terror of the Autons because Andrew played Googe, the guy who gets shrunk and put in the lunchbox, and he sketched Roger Delgado learning his lines, and I now have that sketch, which Andrew kindly gave to me, which I treasure, and Andrew sadly is no longer with us. So, yeah, I had to face my fear. And you really feel actually in this episode that, the build up right through it, that he's, he making him do something that actually wasn't just brave. It's almost the bravest of all, because he's facing what is it you fear. But his fear was to do with, a mistake that he had made, and to confront his own shortcomings. And a lot of bad things that we do as a refusal to not. There's nothing worse. You've seen people overreact when you sort of know, and I've done it, where somebody perhaps says something that makes me feel bad about myself because I sort of know that it's true and they fed upon a shortcoming. You defend yourself even more. So to actually lay yourself open to facing, something that is at the heart of your own fault. And this is what, the Doctor faces, the fact that his own thirst for knowledge is his downfall, his greed, is not just facing a mortal enemy and a cave full of radiation. It's facing his own weakness. And that, ties in with all of Barry Letts's thematic stuff, but also means it's big news for the character. It's more than just facing down another bad guy. It's facing a mirror image of your own faults, which we don't like doing. So that speaks to me much more as I get older. And there's an admirable amount of comedy in this. I mean, the Doctor's just died, and we had Sarah do that brilliant thing of "This is the Abbot of and the Choji," I think, which she does superbly. But this is all going on. The Doctor's died, and the Doctor dies on a joke. While there's life, how brave is that? Because this is really sad. But they've got but they're not sending it up. But it's so good that they can have the jokes without in any way taking away from the impact that we're losing the leading man, and he's died, and we've had a load of dialogue, and now I'm afraid I do remember being a bit disappointed by this, because the first regeneration I saw was Tom Baker into Peter Davison, which takes several stages, whereas this is just a fade from Jon Pertwee to somebody who doesn't really look like Tom Baker as we know him in the show. He doesn't get a credit either, does he? But of course, that's a fine episode of Doctor Who, and I did it no favours in the way that I chose to watch it the first time, watching episode 6 on its own, with all of its characters and sets and things, was all quite new to me, and in isolation, or at the end of their journey, perhaps not as context is all, isn't it? And the journey is all, and you don't appreciate the journey if you only join it at the very end. So I definitely have a renewed admiration for Planet of the Spiders. So I hope that those of you that started this with me when I said, I'm not a great fan of this, and we're like, come on, Toby, this is one of my favourites, because a few people said, going into this is I love Pertwee, and I love the way he goes out. I'm not, and I never lie on these. I'm not contriving things to like about the stories. If I don't, I struggled with a couple. I have struggled on occasion. Time Lash 2, particularly. If it's one and sometimes it's just because I'm not in the right mood as well. So you get what I'm giving you, but it's honestly always honest. I've really enjoyed Planet of the Spiders. I've really enjoyed having Annie as company as well. I've actually enjoyed being able to bring some of the patron feedback as well, because it's a bit like a conversation, isn't it? Then rather than a stumbly monologue full of boring facts about actors and dreadful name dropping from me. What names do you drop, Toby? Oh, usually those near the bottom of the credits. My, what a life you've lived. And also choosing my favourite things. Now I have to choose a favourite thing about episode 6 and a bonus favourite thing. Oh. Well, I suppose my favourite... I mean, I'd love to have chosen the Great One, but Annie already chose that for episode 5. So, well, I have to choose the manner of Jon Pertwee's end and Jon Pertwee himself. And I suppose I could choose one of those as my thing for episode 6 and one of those things as my bonus, but it seems to me that the Venn diagram crosses over a little bit too much. It's a lovely end for Pertwee. The fact that they've had the boldness to go for an end that's not only dramatic but thematic. It has something to say. It has something to say about him, and indeed some of the criticisms that could be levelled at his doctor. They actually make part of the story. And I actually never mind that Pertwee's a bit pompous, because it tends to be rude to people who deserve it, apart from his companions, who he's sometimes awful to. But it's because he is... Yeah, I don't know. He just kind of gets it in the same way that he gets away with the frilly shirt. He kind of gets away with being a bit pompous. I don't know why. Perhaps he just... Perhaps it's just the authority with which he does it. I don't know. He gets away with it. He does things that if other people did, I would find extremely punchable. But I don't know. He's Jon Pertwee. He's the tall light bulb. And I think if he was there for 5 years, and I think that's as I say, I think I'd have probably hoped for a more ambitious effect for the regeneration than a fade from one to the other. But that's because hindsight is always 20/20, and with better special effects. And what would they have done? And that would probably have dated anyway. But it's not about the change. It's about the cause of the change. It's about the fact that they have the audacity to end it on a joke, and it kind of works. And that Pertwee acts it so well, and the Pertwee that we know was a bit nervous about his straight acting, and he proves he can do it, and you really feel that he's been through the mill. And I love that line, "The TARDIS brought me home." Oh, does that not bring a tear to your eye? I know the Doctor is a wanderer in space and time, but Jon Pertwee's Doctor, even though his freedom has been returned to him, home is where it would have been wrong if he'd regenerated anywhere other than the floor of his lab. And, we know that UNIT is going to go and be a thing of the past. So it just seems, whatever you think about him being exiled. But again, of course, if I'd started watching at the time, the idea that Doctor Who doesn't travel in space and time, and you're taking away the very concept of what Doctor Who is by exiling him into Earth. And even that producer, Barry Letts, and his script editor, Terence Dix, when they inherited that idea, said, we don't like that idea, but they still persevered with it for a couple of years because you kind of have to. And the TARDIS brought me home. Don't you just love that? I love that. I love that. And the fact that he lies with his leg up because he couldn't straighten his leg because that would have done his back in because he had a bad back. I think that's the thing. So, there's even a reason why he lies in that particular way. But he really looks like he's been through it. And I think it is an apt end for a fine Doctor. So my thing for episode 6, I guess, is Jon Pertwee and the the regeneration. So then what's my overall thing? Well, I think because he writes, produces, directs, and indeed stars in vocal cameo episode 2. And it's not often I would think or get to choose a producer. And perhaps I can't choose the producer even though he does all of those things that I said. So that's a unique contribution from him. But I don't think I can choose this producer without invoking his script editor too, because they were such a team. And they stand astride the Pertwee era, and I know that they do the handover, and you can, their DNA is all over Robot, but this is really the rounding off of their era. And even though it is clobbered occasionally by some of the shortcomings of the era, and over-reliance on CSO, the occasional aptitude for whole chunks of that are kind of unnecessary. So the Pertwee era, I don't think has as strong guest performances as a matter of course as I think the other eras, because the money has gone on hardware rather than cast. I think there aren't particularly big names. It's more your sort of TV character actors flitting in and out. I think more so perhaps than any other era, which is not a bad policy, because the TV character actor is a marvelous thing, and I love seeing actors like Bernard Kay and John Abernethy and Edwin Richfield, getting top guest billing in stories in the Pertwee era, whereas in other eras you have film actors or highly acclaimed stage performers or whatever. But nonetheless, despite all of those, what could be seen as shortcomings or compromises or whatever of the Pertwee era that are all in Planet of the Spiders, and I still don't know whether I think John Dirth is great or I'm being very charitable, but that at least means he's interesting, hey? And again, I salute Barry Letts's decency for going, there's a stigma attached to this man, but nonetheless, I will put him front and centre. I find that admirable. And I know about that stigma. I think my bonus thing, because I've just brought up various shortcomings, but because the story also exemplifies everything that is great about the Pertwee era, a gameness, a vitality, a thoughtfulness, a spiritualism, the clever way of channeling something that will scare children, but in a wholly containable way. The homage that much of this story is to the era that has preceded it, whether it's casting a load of actors that have already been in it before, so it's like a sort of end of term review in a way, and I think that's nice. That's a bit of loyalty as well, but it's always nice to see faces that you recognise too. Pertwee's love of gadgets and vehicles is present and correct. The brilliance of the central casting of Pertwee and the fabulous Elizabeth Sladen, who are a great team. Nicholas Courtney being all present and correct. Benton being there. I wish he'd been back for the final episode. Yates and the ending of his story, because of course he was supporting military character guy, but he actually gets an arc. He gets a bit of development. It's a celebration, isn't it, of the Pertwee era and everything that Terrance Dicks and Barry Letts achieved, and they transformed the show. I love season 7. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But they inherited a show that was not really what they wanted to do, and created very much their own image of Doctor Who, and it's one that's endured, and it's one that's hugely popular with great swathes of fandom. And as I say, I've not always got on with, but I'm finding absolutely 100% comfort Doctor Who, and I'm really enjoying sort of re-engaging and better engaging with this era as a result of this process. I think the last ones of the Pertwee I did Sea Devils, which I always liked and absolutely adored this time around. Curse of Peladon, which I've always thought was fine and really, really enjoyed. So I think, and I'd always loved Inferno. So look, I mean, I'm looking every time I get to a Pertwee, I'm thinking, I think this is going to be a really positive experience for me. So I hope it is for you. And that's as a result of, those two titans of Doctor who were also, I have to say, thoroughly nice men, thoroughly decent men. And I had the pleasure of meeting and working with them both on many an occasion. And it's very sad that they're no longer with us, but I'm flattered and grateful that I got to be in their orbit. So my bonus thing is the twin talents of Barry Letts and Terence Dix, whose mark can be felt on that episode, but throughout the previous few years. So Jon Pertwee and his regeneration, and Terence Dix and Barry Letts are my things for episode 6. Well, Pertwee and the regeneration is my thing for episode 6. Terence Dix and Barry Letts are my bonus. Annie Wallace, over to you.
So we get on to part 6. Now, part 6 is all about the resolution of the story. The notion that the Doctor knows that the only way he's going to stop this is to take the crystal, which is what really is going on here. The Doctor's Metabolus 3 crystal is what the Great One wants to complete the network of lattice above her, to amplify her brain to exponential ways. Unfortunately, it has I think it creates a sonic loop or something like that, and it essentially destroys her. But at this particular moment, everything is coming together. The members of the meditation center have, by all this time, excuse me, the members of the meditation center have all got spiders hanging on their backs, channeling power through them to get this crystal. But the Doctor is the one who has to do it, and he knows he has to do it. So he takes the crystal to the Great One. It floats up into its final little position, and then, well, all hell breaks loose. Because the spiders are all mentally linked, it's essentially they all implode, they all go insane, and they all die. Yay! But the crystals have a side effect, which is they're full of radiation, and the Doctor's body is so riddled with it by going into the Great One's cave that his cells are destroyed, and this is what pushes him into regeneration, aided by a handy Time Lord who is posing as the Tibetan leader of the meditation center, who is of course fabulous, the fabulous Kampo Rinpoche, also known as Choji. And what Choji does is kind of accelerate the regeneration procedure so that the Doctor isn't in too much pain, it doesn't take too long. And there we are, he's lying on the floor. And his final words, tears, Sarah Jane, where there's life, there's... And he's gone. But what's happening? Oh my God, this is it. This is the moment. This is it. It's regeneration time. And slowly the face changes. And there's a stranger there with dark hair and a big nose. And who is he? Oh my God. And yeah, that's a big moment. And of course we have to wait another year to finally see the, there's the cat. We have to finally see the Tom Baker season, which as a first season was outstanding. So there's my waffle. The next thing, of course, is the bonus thing. What would I have as the bonus? I'm going to actually choose the spiders hanging off people's backs. I think that was quite a profound image for me as well. Seeing this the spiders, and it kind of they came to life on this mandala, or rather they were transported on this mandala, and then it would be there, and it would kind of pulse for a second, and then it would leap onto the person's back, and then it would cloak itself, it would disappear. But it's now controlling its human puppet, and it can control like what I suppose now you'd call force lightning through the fingertips, and that can knock people out or it can kill them. So quite resonant also of Turn Left, when this horrible beetle was hanging on the back of Donna about 12 years ago or thereabouts. I'm really bad with that. But yes, similar idea of having a creature on your back. So the spiders were a big deal to me. I would love one of those in my house. You know what? I'd stick it up on the wall to scare everyone that came in the house, you know, because they were beautifully made. They looked really good in terms of sculpting. And I think that made a difference. The movement wasn't fantastic, except I remember seeing, I don't know what program it was, but what they'd done is they'd put like a clockwork mechanism in one of them, I think, and some of the legs moved so that they could wind it up and it would roll across the studio floor and the legs would go, and that was really effective. Really effective. And yeah, creepy. So there you go. There you go. There's all my stuff to do with Planet of the Spiders, which now I've spoken about it. I've got to go and rewatch it now. But that's all right because I've got the discs. I'm a big disc buyer. In fact, I've just bought, she said, I just bought this one. Look. Yes, it's the Blu-ray set of season 8, which was Joe Grant's first season with the Master. Yes, it's that funny season where the Master is in every story, which is a little implausible, but it was very exciting for me because this here was my first season. So 1970, was it 72 or 71? You know something, I can't even remember. But it was brilliant. And I haven't even watched this yet, so there you go. So, yeah, please do buy discs because we want them to keep putting this beautiful packages out. Terror of the Audience. Planet of the Spiders. Do watch it, do enjoy it. So what am I up to after this? Well, I'm really busy at work at the moment because we've got some big stuff coming up. Sally's been quiet for a while in Old Hollyoaks. And, yeah, being busy doing some good storylines, which I'm sure you're going to see this summer, and it's exciting. Obviously, this year we are coming out of lockdown, hopefully coming out of COVID's biggest nightmare. I've had my jab. I hope everyone else over a certain age is going to be able to get it as well. And then we can move on and we can start having fun and we can start meeting and having conventions and little meetups in pubs like Warp does at the Britain's Protection every month, which I go to. And that's it, really. I hope you're going to have a lovely year and a wonderful summer and much better than we have had this time. So that's about it for me for Planet of the Spiders. And I kind of over to you, Toby, really. I mean, you're the one who's going to have to do all this. So I hope this is good. Okay, take care. Lovely to see you. Bye-bye.
Ah, thank you, Annie, who was talking of a future that is now in the past, but that is my fault, not Annie's, because I asked everyone to sort of do this at the same time, and then obviously people send their videos and audios whenever, but it means that some people then languish in the archives of Haydock Towers until it's time for another Pertwee to come round, and I try and mix up the stories so that none that are too similar follow each other and all of that. So Annie wasn't to know that by the time it went out, the saddest storylines and the summer and the emergence from lockdown have all been and gone. But Annie continues to shine in Hollyoaks and is on Twitter at Annie Wallace. And but we haven't actually seen each other in the flesh since before the pandemic, so this is a lovely way to sort of connect with people, even if I just see their faces staring out of my computer. And if you're just listening to the audio of this, because I say this a lot, the podcasts are currently my priority because they're easy to put together. I do have video versions that will, I suppose, go out at some point, and thanks to people like Annie who've recorded videos for that purpose. But at the moment, it's easier for me to get the podcasts out, and I do have to do other things. So the videos are on the back burner. But Annie did produce the season 8 box set. She has it. So she really is one of us. And the Britain's Protection that she referred to there is a pub in Manchester. So, you know, if you want to avail yourself of a monthly meet where one of the stars of Hollyoaks is there indulging in Doctor Who flavoured geekery, then, well, that was a plug for that. So thanks to Annie. Now, Annie chose... I don't quite know what Annie chose for episode 6. We had a very enthusiastic synopsis. I suppose it was the build up to the Doctor's regeneration, wasn't it? But she didn't actually specify which element it was, but I assume it's that. So I suppose I might kind of get a point for that. And I was tempted to choose, well, one, the spiders. I think it was Boris the Spider, wasn't it, that Matt Irvin sort of showcased, which was the one with the mechanism within it, who I think we could have seen a bit more of actually in the story. I think I didn't go for the spiders because I think they're compromised a bit by CSO, and I think I mean their death scene isn't great, is it? Where they're all sort of upside down and they've just been sort of chucked about. But I think the spiders are generally pretty successful, and I think the Queen on Sarah's back is amazing, and I think the image of the spider on the back is a compelling image. And of course, it allows for that wonderful line of Campo's about not all spiders sit on the back, and they become a metaphor as well. But it's a great image, and it's, of course, then they go invisible, so the people can then walk around and sit on chairs, but without having to have the spiders on the whole time. But they're there, and the audience know that they're there. And I think that really is an affecting image, and the Great One's fantastic. Some of the times when they move the good, they are, but they are occasionally hampered by dodgy CSO. So I could easily have chosen the spiders, and particularly the image of the spider on the back, especially as that's on the cover of the Target novel, with Sarah with her beautiful stripy costume, which is I love that whole combination of Sarah, that haircut of hers, and the spider on the back on that costume is a great visual for me, because I love Sarah, and yeah, that image is a striking one from my childhood. But instead, I went for the people, and I make no apologies for that. I mean, I was never gonna. I never win these things, and I mean, you know, what is in the story when everything is new, how can anything be a surprise? Yeah, but also when you always fail, that's not a surprise either, and I'm used to those sorts of surprises in life of never quite prospering. It's it's never a surprise anymore when things don't turn out my way. But I had to choose Barry Letts and Terrance Dicks. I had to, and I had to choose Pertwee and his regeneration. And I suppose that Annie chose the Great One in episode 5. I would have definitely chosen the Great One for episode 6, then probably Pertwee and his regeneration as my bonus, and I wouldn't have had a chance to acknowledge Barry Letts and Terrance Dicks. But it is all about the people, isn't it? And it's all about, well, it's all about those gurus, isn't it? About those wise old men who taught us to look at the world in a different way. Yeah, I don't think I can say it any better than that. Thanks for listening, and I hope you're in a happy time and place. Thanks ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My special guest for Planet of the Spiders was Hollyoaks star Annie Wallace, who can be found on Twitter at Annie Wallace. I'm grateful to Annie and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, not that one, Peter Burns, Chris Phone, Peter Harness, that one, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Tim Arding, Chris Arkle, David, Nigel Bromley, Jenny at Blue Box 99, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Crocker, Rob Dawson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Paul Dunn, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Ian K. McLachlan, Gavin McLean, Nathan Martin, Rick Moran, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Matti Sarillo, Frank Shales and David Trainier. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. if you would like to join that list of names, and I read out Ian K. McLachlan's name, he's still on my patrons list, although sadly he passed away last month. But I think I might still throw him in there, a bit like what was the name of the actor, Sidney in Cagney and Lacey, who died, a couple of seasons in, but stayed on the credits right up till the end of the show as a mark of respect. And I was a great respecter of Sidney Clute. I was a great respecter of Ian K. McLachlan, and very grateful for his patronage. So he's going to stay on the list of names of people I occasionally read out. If you are a patron, you get your name read out. The frequency depends on the level of patron that you are, but most things are available at the lowest tier of patronage, which is £3 per month, and you get 10% off that, and indeed off any of the higher tiers if you sign up for a year in one go in advance. But yeah, you don't just get your name read out with increasing frequency depending on your tier level. You also get, at entry point at the lowest tier, you get bonus material, advance releases. They will have listened to this burble 6 months earlier than you if you're just getting it on iTunes or Podbean or Spotify or any of those on the Toby Hadoke's Time Travel feed. They get this on a special patron page that also has an exclusive podcast called Far Too Much Information, which adds even more arcana to the Too Much Information strand, which you will also get earlier, not 6 months earlier, but you also get a month, 6 weeks earlier than everybody else if you're a patron, and ditto the Indefinable Magics. So you get early stuff, you get exclusive stuff, you get interviews that I've got kicking around with people, or brand new ones that I've done with Doctor Who people, and a monthly AMA, and various other things. If you don't want to tie in to an obligation, though, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke to support these in just a one-off manner. I've also heard from Rick Moran, who said, "I love this story. The third Doctor went out on a high." I've not always loved this story, Rick, as you heard, but I very much enjoyed it this time around. And if you enjoy these podcasts, please go to iTunes or to Podbean or Spotify and give them a 5-star rating and a few nice lines of review. That really helps to get the word out about them. Thank you. Oh, it's so much that I wonder, I hope I don't seem like somebody who's a bit too lovey-dovey. I mean, I'm probably a bit lovey. I don't mind that. I actually don't mind that. There are worse things to be than slightly theatrical. But I do much more enjoy the process of looking for the good things in a story. And I've always been so angry with Planet of the Spiders. It was a story I hated. I couldn't believe what a letdown it was. And looking at it objectively, it is wayward. Metabilis 3, I think, is a bit of a stinker. But I think sometimes you can fail to see the wood for the blue trees, and that much that surrounds that is very, very impressive. I mean, most of the stuff on Earth is great. I don't think I talked about the spiders enough in those 6 episodes. I think they're really good, and I do remember Matt Irvin. There's an article in Doctor Who magazine, isn't there, where he's introducing Boris the Spider, and Matt, who was always the sort of spokesperson for the visual effects department. He was their designated representative. I think he always talked very fondly of Boris the Spider. But they are, there is something creepy about spiders. So listen, I hope you're all doing very well, and things are getting a bit tricky out there, aren't they, in the real world? Train fares have gone up, electricity bills going up. Britain, as I record this, Liz Truss is about to become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and I think whatever your political persuasion, I think it might be proof that scientists need to look again as to whether cream rises to the top or not. But anyway, it's a funny old world at the moment, and funny as in, oh crikey, are we in for a sticky time over the next couple of years? And we might well be. So I think the only way to beat the dark is to, as I say, try and be united by our joy for Doctor Who. Sometimes having a shared interest in something can be a nice thing when everything falls apart a little bit. So I hope everyone's doing okay out there, and that this silly old show of ours could put a smile on our faces even as everything falls apart. And if things really go to pot, we could all just drop out and go to a Buddhist retreat. I mean, what's the worst that could happen?